Through hiking any of the long trails of the world is an amazing experience, and it puts the human body to a mind-boggling test. My name is Happy Hour, and I'm an exercise and nutritional physiologist. In parts 1 and 2 of this video series, I described to you the bizarre changes my body underwent as a result of hiking the Pacific Crest Trail. In this video, I'll describe to you what happened to my body in the months after the PCT and what all of this means for prospective thru hikers. I've explained this, what appeared to be a very strange phenomenon, and now it all kind of adds up and makes sense in a different light. What does it mean for a thru hiker? Well, I do want to really point out strongly that we all need to find reasons to be physically active and just maintain our own zest for life. And I think for those of us who hike, thru hike, or any other sort of hiking or backpacking, or find joy and excitement in any other physical activity, it's really important to pursue that, because even if the day of the event, so to speak, let's say it's an Ironman triathlon or it's a marathon, in the case of this video, it's a thru hike. This sort of thing gives us a zest for life and a passion for staying healthy and taking care of ourselves. If we have something like this on the calendar or down the road that we want to be fit and healthy for, that gives us reason to be fit and healthy for many, many days besides those days that we're doing the so-called event. And so I don't want to suggest that any of this should be a discouraging thing for anybody who's interested in a thru hike or in doing other physically demanding endeavors that on the day of or during the thru hike may not be the healthiest thing in the world. You need reasons to exercise, and if you have a few occasions where it's not perfectly healthy and it's every respect, but it gives you motivation to stay healthy for every other day in your life, I think it's the right thing to do. The other thing I want to point out is that I did all these measurements before the hike and right after the hike. But then, 8 months after ending the hike, and at 12 months after ending the hike, I did these measurements again and found that it was not a permanent change. This was a transient change. Everything had got out of whack over the 4 months of the hike, but then I let the dust settle, got back to where there's food available, quit walking 25 miles a day, brought back the energy that's needed, the body turned on all these metabolic processes again, and everything normalized. My lipids went perfectly normal again, and bone mineral density, which was really striking, that's very slow to adapt, fully normalized by 8 months. The 12-month follow-up was almost moot at that point. So that's reassuring. And that's consistent with what we know about what's seen in athletes. Athletes who oftentimes exhibit phenomena like this, if they come back into a state of sort of normal balance between energy intake and energy expenditure, the systems that regulate all this in the body, they haven't gone away. They've just been turned off. So you bring back energy balance and everything comes back into alignment again. It's really not a bad thing, but you do have to be cautious. You don't want to be careless about these. So it raises a question, can you prevent this during a thru hike in the first place? And I would say yes. There are some people that do thru hikes and probably don't have this at all. But it comes down to two things: energy intake and energy expenditure. If you're really low on body fat, you might not be able to count on body fat as being a source of calories to sort of help close that gap. So it might be a little trickier in that case. So how can you close this gap? Well, maybe you would have to try to either A, increase access to food, or B, decrease energy expenditure, or walking energy expenditure, or would be under your voluntary control, or maybe a little bit of both. I happen to have been in a hurry. I didn't feel hurried. It felt wonderful. I loved the hike. But I happened to be in a timeline where I had to start late. I was almost at the very end of May before I could start the PCT. And in order to get to Canada before the snow flies, I really wanted to be done by September sometime, before October. And so I ended up finishing in 4 months. You can do this thing in 5 months or 6 months and do less miles each day. You can also take more time to go into town and get food, maybe so you have more frequent resupplies A, it allows you to get to town and eat a lot on more frequent occasions. But B, you can carry, let's say you carry just as much food for a 3-day carry as you carry for a 5-day carry. Well, that means you can eat a lot more food. It only needs to last you 3 days instead of 5, or you might think of it in terms of 7-day food carry instead of a 10-day food carry. So get into town more often. You could increase your food carrying capacity, but that increases the weight, and I don't know that that's a real good strategy. I was reluctant to go to town. I know people are fond of town. They love the town days, but I wasn't that fond of it. I always felt like I'd rather be on the wilderness. And on top of that, every town day slowed my progress to the northern terminus. And being on a timeline, I had to be cautious about that. So A, I wanted to stay in the wilderness, and B, it was the right thing to do to get to finish the trail before the snow started flying. And so I really didn't take many town days. Or if I did, I popped in and popped out. I didn't stay long. It was very short visits, so I didn't get the opportunity to eat for a day or 2, or sometimes 3 that people take Neros in town, or 0 days for 2 or 3 days in town. But had I done that, I would have had higher energy intake, and that would have helped close this gap. So those are just things to think about. Was it the end of the world that I lost bone and had an increase in cholesterol? I would say no. It was a temporary, transient phenomenon, not ideal, but I don't think there's any long-term consequences in my case. Now, I will mention that I don't know if it was a year or 2 years after I finished the PCT, I went out to hike the Colorado Trail, and I took off right away hiking longer distances than I did on the PCT. And I hadn't hiked as much in preparation. I had goofed up a toe. I was doing a lot of exercise, so I essentially trained by cycling instead. So I had the engine to go and to do long days of exercise. But my bones, tendons, and ligaments hadn't adapted to walking. Cycling doesn't do a lot for bone. Matter of fact, it has negative effects on bone in some cases, but walking does. So I went onto the trail, Colorado Trail, doing longer days. I think I probably ended up in a similar situation with an energy mismatch, and in just a week, I had a stress fracture and had to abandon the trail. So that stress fracture is really what we would consider a clinically relevant manifestation of this energy mismatch. And so on the PCT, I didn't suffer any clinically relevant manifestations of this energy mismatch problem, but I could have been at really high risk for a stress fracture, and maybe I was right on the edge of it, and had I gone a little further, maybe I would have ended up having to abandon the PCT. As you may be aware, there's loads and loads of case reports in the biomedical literature on people who have to abandon thru hikes because of stress fractures. So it's not out of the question, and that was probably something I was at very high risk for on the PCT, but somehow dodged. And it manifested itself then just a year later, I think was the Colorado Trail, and it did so in short order, and it was heartbreaking to have to leave that trail in just 1 week after starting. Things happen, and you just have to accept it. And quit denying the fact that this is the end of the hike. I'm going to end this video here. I'd like to post another video, to be determined, but I think I'm going to do it to frame what I just described to you in a larger phenomenon or a larger context of something that's known and studied in the elite athlete world. It's called relative energy deficiency in sport, or REDS, some people say REDS, to really better explain maybe all the other things that were going on and all the other potentially important clinical manifestations of having an energy deficiency like I described to you. So I didn't suffer any major consequences, but in an athletic world, if somebody presented with what I just described happened to myself, and this was monitored by a team physician, they would have been pulled off of full practice, undergone a very thorough medical workup, and then determined from there whether they could go back to play or to practice right away. Maybe be asked to be pulled off the team or be sidelined until they got it rectified. If you think it'd be fascinating to understand, and I'll describe that phenomenon, and then I'll put this story about my own experience on the PCT right into that context, maybe make a comment and let me know if that's something that sounds interesting to you. It would be a little more scientific or biomedical or clinical than what this was, but yeah, I think it'd be a neat thing, and I'll probably do that. Thank you, and I hope to get a Red S video posted soon.